So today we're going to be talking about illusions. No, not optical illusions. We're going to be talking about literary illusions. Illusions are subtle references to something else, usually a work of literature. It's hard to define what an illusion is, but we can talk a little bit about what it's not. First of all, it is not a direct reference to something. So if the main character is reading Romeo and Juliet in English class, that's not an illusion. But if she thinks about her boyfriend and how their parents don't want them together and she says that they're star-crossed lovers, that would be a Romeo and Juliet illusion. It's something subtle woven into the story, a phrase, a reference, a title sometimes. It's not an allegory, which is a story where the characters and events are symbolic in some way. We'll talk more about allegories in another video. I'll talk about whether C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia are a Christian allegory and some other famous examples of allegories, but for now, illusions are not allegories, and they're not retellings. So, for example, the novel Brave New World references Shakespeare's The Tempest, where Miranda, one of the characters, says, "Oh, brave new world that hath such people in it." That's an illusion, but the story itself is not a retelling of The Tempest. The title is just referencing it. One that you're probably familiar with is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. The title of The Fault in Our Stars is a reference to Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, with the quote, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." The idea of the fault in our stars is that, while in the case of Brutus and Cassius it was their own fault what happened, this novel is a tragedy where it's not the fault of the main characters, but of circumstances outside their control. In this case, the fact that they both are teenagers with terminal cancer. Several of Agatha Christie's novels are also illusions. For instance, Evil Under the Sun, the title is a reference to Ecclesiastes, a book of the Bible in which the phrase evil under the sun appears multiple times. By the Pricking of My Thumbs is a reference to the witch's song in Macbeth, "Something wicked this way comes." You'll also find a lot of Shakespeare allusions in Star Trek, particularly in the original and Next Generation. Picard loved to quote Shakespeare. And there are even some direct references to Shakespeare, like when he and Data put on a performance of Henry V on the holodeck. But there are indirect ones as well. For instance, the episode in the original Star Trek series, The Conscience of the King, was not a direct retelling of Shakespeare's Hamlet, but it had a lot of references to it, like an old man with a dark secret and a young woman who seemed to be a little mentally unbalanced, and of course the title being a reference to a quote from the play. Can you find illusions that are not titles? Absolutely. I don't want to leave you thinking that they're always just the title of a book or an episode or something like that. You can also find them in common everyday speech. For example, if you talk about someone's Achilles heel, you're saying their greatest weakness, but where that originally comes from is Achilles, the mythological character who was invulnerable all over his body except for his heel. Or the term Trojan for a common type of computer virus is a reference to the Trojan horse from Greek mythology, which was used to smuggle the Greeks into Troy at the end of the Trojan War. And of course, as I mentioned before, the phrase star-crossed lovers is a reference to Romeo and Juliet, where the prologue reads, "From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives." So to sum all that up, an illusion is a subtle reference to usually a well-known work of literature. It's not a direct reference like the character reading a classic novel in English class, and it doesn't take over the entire story like an allegory or a retelling would, but it definitely references something else in a way so that most readers will be able to identify it as long as they're familiar with the original work. I know illusions are a kind of tricky concept, but I hope that helped to clear some things up. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays, and I post about literary concepts, reading, writing, classic novels, college tips, study tips, and much more.